My nephew Jake stood in my living room on that Tuesday morning, holding a manila folder that would destroy everything I thought I knew about family. His face wore that practiced look of concern I'd seen so many times before, but this time something was different. His wife Sandra stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder, unable to hide the slight upturn at the corner of her mouth. "Aunt Carol," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I need you to sit down. I have something difficult to tell you." He spread the papers across my coffee table, the same table where Harold and I had signed our first mortgage 45 years ago. "You're broke, Aunt Carol. The investments failed. The market crashed your portfolio. You have nothing left except this house." The words hit me like physical blows. $3 million gone? "But don't worry," he continued, sliding a document toward me. "I figured everything out. Sign your house over to me, and you'll always have a home. You'll live with us. We'll take care of you." My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. 2 years of trusting him completely. 2 years of letting him handle everything. Because the grief of losing Harold had left me unable to think about money or future or anything beyond getting through each day. I signed where he pointed, each signature feeling like another piece of my independence disappearing. Sandra actually smiled then, a quick flash before she caught herself. But as I set down the pen, something Harold used to say echoed in my mind. "Always know your assets, Carol. Always." I looked up at Jake, this nephew I'd raised like a son, and asked the question that had been forming in the back of my mind for weeks. "Jake, I'm curious about something. Did you ever check who actually owns your house? Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories." My name is Carol Patterson, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd become the kind of person with a story worth telling. For 43 beautiful years, I was Mrs. Harold Patterson, wife of the most principled man who ever lived. We weren't rich when we started. Harold worked construction. I was a substitute teacher. Every penny we saved was deliberate, thoughtful. Harold would joke that I could squeeze $1 until it begged for mercy. But really, we were partners in everything, especially in building our future. We raised 2 daughters in a modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. Emma became a software engineer in Seattle. Linda's a nurse in Chicago. Both successful, both independent, both taught by their father to work hard and save harder. Harold and I, we were the family pillars. When Harold's brother lost his job, we covered their mortgage for 6 months. When my sister needed cancer treatment, we paid what insurance wouldn't. We never kept score. Family was family. Jake was my younger sister, Margaret's boy. When Margaret struggled with addiction, Jake spent summers with us. I taught him to ride a bike in our driveway, helped him with algebra at our kitchen table, celebrated when he got into college. When Margaret died 5 years ago, Jake spoke at her funeral about how Harold and I had been his real parents in every way that mattered. "You saved me," he'd said, tears streaming down his face. "I owe you everything." That's why when Harold died 2 years ago and Jake stepped forward to help, it felt like God's provision. My gentle giant, my Harold, gone from a heart attack at 71. And there was Jake, offering to handle the overwhelming financial maze Harold had always managed. I thought I was blessed. I couldn't have imagined I was simply prey. 2 years ago, before the nightmare began, my days had a rhythm as comfortable as breathing. Harold would wake at 6:30 sharp. No alarm needed after 40 years of the same schedule. I'd hear him humming in the bathroom, always Unchained Melody, our wedding song, and I'd smile into my pillow before getting up to start the coffee. Colombian dark roast for him, French vanilla for me. By the time he padded into the kitchen in his worn terry cloth slippers, I'd have his mug ready, exactly 2 sugars, no cream. "Morning, beautiful," he'd say, kissing my forehead. After 4 decades, he still called me beautiful first thing in the morning, when my hair was a silver mess and my face showed every one of my 66 years. We'd sit at our small breakfast nook, him reading the financial section out loud while I worked on my crossword puzzle. "Apple's up again," he'd announce. "That stock I bought in '98 just keeps climbing." He'd been right about so many investments over the years. Construction work had given him a paycheck, but his real genius was in seeing value where others didn't. "Carol," he'd said that last normal morning, "we've done good, 3 million in assets. Our girls are set. Our grandkids' college is covered. And if anything happens to me, you'll never have to worry." I'd swatted him with my newspaper. "Harold Patterson, you stop that talk right now." But he'd caught my hand, suddenly serious. "I mean it. I've made sure everything's organized. Jake knows where all the documents are. He's got power of attorney if you need help. The boy's got a good head for numbers." Those Sunday dinners were everything. Emma would video call from Seattle. Linda would drive in from Chicago when she could, and Jake would arrive with Sandra and their twins. My dining room would fill with laughter as Harold told his construction stories for the 100th time. "So there I was, hanging from a beam 20 stories up," he'd begin, and Jake would grin. "Uncle Harold, it gets higher every time you tell it." I'd serve pot roast with all the fixings, Harold's mother's recipe. Jake would always have seconds, sometimes thirds. "Nobody cooks like you, Aunt Carol," he'd say, helping clear plates while Sandra gossiped with Linda about their book clubs. The twins would crawl into Harold's lap, begging for candy from his secret stash. "Don't tell your grandmother," he'd whisper loudly enough for me to hear, sneaking them peppermints. After dinner, Harold and Jake would retreat to the den to discuss investments. I'd catch fragments of their conversation: diversified portfolio, municipal bonds, steady growth over flash. Jake took notes in a leather journal, treating Harold's words like gospel. "You're the son I never had," Harold told him once when he thought I wasn't listening. "Promise me you'll take care of Carol if something happens." Jake's response had been immediate, fervent. "Always. Uncle Harold, always." The garden was my sanctuary. Harold had built raised beds when my knees started protesting. Every morning after breakfast, I'd tend my tomatoes, roses, and herbs. Harold would watch from the patio, pretending to read, but really just enjoying seeing me happy. "Carol's got magic hands," he'd tell anyone who'd listen. "She could make a desert bloom." The neighbors would stop by for cuttings and advice. Mrs. Chen from next door called me the plant whisperer. Evenings were ours alone. We'd watch Jeopardy, competing fiercely but playfully. Harold usually won at history and geography. I dominated literature and pop culture. Then we'd sit on the back porch, holding hands as the fireflies emerged, not needing words after so many years of conversation. Life was simple, beautiful, complete. We'd built our fortress of family and financial security brick by brick. I never imagined someone would dismantle it from the inside. The first crack in my perfect image of Jake appeared 6 months ago, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. I'd driven to the grocery store for my weekly shopping, still buying too much food for one person because I couldn't break the habit of cooking for 2. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Jake's car, except it wasn't the reliable Honda Accord I knew. It was a gleaming white Mercedes-Benz, so new it still had temporary tags. Jake was loading shopping bags into the trunk, designer sunglasses I'd never seen before perched on his head. When he spotted me, something flickered across his face. Was it panic? Before his usual smile appeared. Aunt Carol, what a surprise. He hurried over, helping me out of my old Camry with exaggerated concern. You should have called me. I would have picked up whatever you needed. Jake, I said, unable to hide my surprise. Is that your car? He glanced back at the Mercedes, then laughed, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. Oh, that. Yeah, business has been really good lately. You know how it is. Got to project success to achieve success, right? He was talking faster than usual, his hands moving more animatedly. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about your car. That Camry's getting old. Maybe we should look into getting you something newer, safer. This car runs perfectly fine, I said, something in his eagerness making me defensive. Harold maintained it meticulously. But Jake, a Mercedes? That must have cost. Got a great deal, he interrupted. Corporate lease program, tax write-off. Very smart financially. He was already steering me toward the store entrance. Let me shop with you. Sandra's at her book club, and I was just grabbing some things for dinner. His cart was full of items I'd never seen him buy before. Imported cheeses, Wagyu beef, a bottle of wine with a price tag that made me gasp internally. This from the nephew who used to joke about being professionally broke just 2 years ago. That evening, I opened Facebook to look at photos of my granddaughter's school play. Jake's profile appeared in my feed. The confident businessman smiling back at me from his new profile picture looked nothing like the anxious young man who'd cried in my kitchen after his mother died. The posts from the last month told a story I hadn't been aware of. A weekend trip to Vegas, dinner at restaurants Harold and I would have saved for anniversaries, Sandra sporting a designer handbag that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment had been. But it was the vacation photos from Dubai that really caught my attention, posted just 3 weeks ago. Living our best life. Sandra had captioned a photo of them on a yacht. When had they gone to Dubai? Jake hadn't mentioned traveling. In fact, just last month he'd told me he was too busy with my portfolio to take any time off. My daughter Emma called that night, right on schedule for our weekly chat. Mom, I saw Jake's Facebook posts. Dubai? Since when can Jake afford Dubai? Business is doing well, I heard myself repeating his words. He's working very hard. Emma's silence stretched uncomfortably long. Mom, he's an accountant at a mid-size firm. I know what accountants make. Tom's brother is a senior accountant in Seattle, and he couldn't afford that lifestyle. Something doesn't add up. Emma, I said, feeling oddly defensive. Not everyone who succeeds is doing something wrong. Jake's been wonderful to me. He handles everything, sends me reports every month. The portfolio is doing fine. Have you verified those reports with anyone else? The question hung in the air. Verified? Why would I need to verify? This was Jake, the boy who'd sobbed in Harold's arms when his father left, the young man who'd spoken so beautifully at Harold's funeral, promising to protect me. But that night, as I lay in bed, Harold's voice echoed in my memory. Trust but verify, Carol, especially with money, even with family. Especially with family. Why had he emphasized that? I spent the next week constructing elaborate explanations for everything. Jake had always been smart. Maybe he'd gotten promoted and was too modest to tell me. The Mercedes could be a company car. The Dubai trip might have been a work conference. Accountants traveled for conferences, didn't they? The expensive groceries. Well, Sandra had mentioned she'd gotten a raise at the marketing firm. Couples deserve to celebrate their success. Every morning, I'd sit with my coffee and pull out the monthly statements Jake sent me. The letterhead looked official. Patterson Estate Management. The numbers were all there, $3.1 million, actually up from last month. The portfolio was diversified across mutual funds, bonds, and conservative stocks. just like Harold would have wanted. Jake even included little notes in the margins. Moved 10% to municipal bonds for tax advantages, or market volatility expected, staying conservative. But Emma's question nagged at me. Verified. Such a simple word, but it felt like betrayal even to consider it. I found myself at the computer one afternoon logging into our old Charles Schwab account. The password Harold had used for everything still worked. Our anniversary date. But when the page loaded, it showed a zero balance. Account closed. My heart pounded. I called Jake immediately. "Oh, Aunt Carol," he said, his voice patient but slightly exasperated. "I told you about this months ago. We moved everything to a new management firm with better rates and lower fees. Remember? You signed the transfer papers." Did I remember? The months after Harold's death were a blur of papers and signatures and Jake's reassuring presence. Maybe. I don't. It's okay, his voice softened. I know it's been hard. That's why I'm handling everything. The new firm doesn't have online access for clients. It's more secure that way. But I print everything out for you monthly. You trust me, don't you? Of course I do. The words came automatically. Good. Hey, why don't Sandra and I come for dinner Sunday? We miss your pot roast. That Sunday, Jake arrived with flowers and a concerned expression. Over dinner, he was extra attentive, refilling my water glass, complimenting every dish. But when I mentioned wanting to meet with another financial advisor, just to understand things better, his fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Another advisor? His voice was carefully controlled, but I saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. Aunt Carol, are you saying you don't trust me? No, Jake. I just thought, after everything I've done? He set down his fork, his eyes actually filling with tears. I've spent countless hours managing your money, making sure you're secure. I haven't taken a penny in management fees because you're family. And now you want to bring in some stranger who'll charge you thousands just to tell you what I've been showing you for free? Sandra reached over and touched his hand. Jake's been so stressed, Carol. He stays up late working on your accounts, making sure everything's perfect. It hurts him that you doubt him. The tears in Jake's eyes looked so genuine. Uncle Harold trusted me. On his deathbed, he asked me to take care of you. And now, he pushed back from the table. Maybe I should just stop. Let you find someone else. No, the word burst from me. The thought of navigating finances alone, of losing Jake's visits, his help, his presence in my life, it was terrifying. Jake, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Of course, I trust you. He let me coax him back to the table, let me apologize repeatedly, let me pack extra leftovers for them to take home. But as they left, I heard Sandra whisper to him in the driveway. That was close. She's old, Jake replied. She'll forget about it by next week. Standing behind my front door, I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but I pushed it down, buried it deep. This was Jake, family, the boy I'd helped raise. Those words I'd overheard. I must have misunderstood. I had to have misunderstood, because the alternative was unthinkable. The truth arrived on a rainy Wednesday morning, delivered by a postal worker who had no idea he was bringing the evidence that would shatter my world. I almost didn't notice the envelope among the grocery store circulars and credit card offers. It was from Midwest Financial Trust, a bank I didn't recognize, addressed to me but with Jake's office suite number crossed out and my home address handwritten beside it. Forwarded to correct address, was stamped in red. I nearly threw it away, assuming it was junk mail. But something about seeing Jake's office address made me pause. Why would mail for me go to his office? I opened it at the kitchen table. the same spot where I'd signed all those papers after Harold's funeral. It was an account statement. My name was at the top, Carol Patterson Trust Account. But I'd never heard of this account. My eyes scanned down to the balance, 1,847,293. That seemed wrong, too low, but it was the recent transactions that made my coffee mug slip from my hand, shattering on the floor. Withdrawal, $400,000. Transfer to J. Patterson Business Holdings. Date, March 15th, 2 weeks ago. The same day Jake had told me the market was volatile and he was keeping everything in conservative bonds. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, then stopped. Who would I call? Jake? No. Instead, I found the customer service number on the statement. Each ring felt like an eternity. Midwest Financial Trust. This is Robert speaking. Yes, I have an account there. Carol Patterson. I just received a statement, and I don't understand some withdrawals. After security questions that I barely managed to answer through my growing panic, Robert's voice returned, professionally cheerful. Yes, Mrs. Patterson, I show your trust account here. Current balance of $1,847,293. How can I help you? There was a withdrawal. $400,000. I didn't authorize that. Let me check. The clicking of keys. I show that withdrawal was authorized by Mr. Jake Patterson. He has full power of attorney on this account. But he sends me statements. Monthly statements showing I have over $3 million. Robert's pause was telling. Mrs. Patterson, according to our records, this account was opened 2 years ago with an initial deposit of $3.2 million. The current balance is what I stated. There have been regular withdrawals and transfers to various accounts under Mr. Patterson's control. Various accounts? My voice was barely a whisper. I show 12 transfers over the past 18 months. Would you like me to email you a complete transaction history? Yes, please. I gave him my email address, my personal one that Jake didn't know about. Harold had set it up for me years ago for online shopping. Mrs. Patterson, Robert's voice had shifted, becoming gentler. If you believe there's been unauthorized activity, you should contact our fraud department. And perhaps speak with an attorney. I hung up and sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the shattered pieces of my coffee mug, staring at the statement. The numbers swam before my eyes. I pulled out the folder where I kept Jake's monthly reports. Last month's report showed $3.1 million, safely invested. The Midwest financial statement showed $1.8 million with hundreds of thousands bleeding out to accounts I'd never heard of. I opened my laptop with shaking fingers. The email from Robert was already there. 23 pages of transactions, each withdrawal perfectly timed, never more than $500,000, always just under federal reporting limits. The money went to J. Patterson Business Holdings, Sandra Patterson Consulting, JP Investment Group, and other official-sounding entities. Jake hadn't just stolen from me. He'd created an elaborate system to do it. I thought about Harold's funeral, Jake's arm around me as I sobbed. Don't worry about anything, Aunt Carol. I'll handle everything. It's what Uncle Harold wanted. He'd been planning this even then. While I was burying my husband, Jake was already calculating how to rob me. The strange thing was, I didn't cry. Not yet. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at real numbers that proved the nephew I loved like a son had been systematically destroying my future. The boy who'd eaten Sunday dinners at this very table, who'd called me his second mom in birthday cards, who'd promised Harold he'd protect me. He'd left me just enough to survive on paper, probably planning to take even that eventually. But he'd made one mistake. The mail forwarding had failed. One envelope, one accident. And now I knew. I knew I needed professional help. but I couldn't go to just anyone. Jake knew every financial advisor in Columbus. He'd made sure to tell me how well connected he was. Instead, I remembered Harold's friend from his construction days, Marcus Thompson, who'd become a forensic accountant specializing in fraud cases. Harold had joked that Marcus could find a missing penny in a haystack. I called him from my car parked at the grocery store because I'd become paranoid. Jake might somehow be monitoring my home phone. Carol? My God, I've been meaning to call since. Harold, I'm so sorry. Marcus, I need your help. Can I pay you in cash? His voice sharpened immediately. Come to my office, back entrance. Don't tell anyone you're coming. Marcus's office smelled like old coffee and paper, comfortingly familiar. I handed him everything. The real bank statement, Jake's fake reports, the email from Midwest Financial. He studied them in silence for 20 minutes, occasionally whistling low under his breath. Finally, he looked up, removing his reading glasses. Carol, I need you to prepare yourself. This is worse than you think. Over the next 3 hours, Marcus walked me through Jake's deception with the precision of a surgeon revealing cancer. He'd pulled my actual financial records, using his professional connections and my signed authorization. The picture that emerged was devastating. Jake started moving money the day after Harold's funeral, Marcus said, pointing to a highlighted transaction. Small amounts at first, $10,000 here, $15,000 there, testing to see if you'd notice. When you didn't, he got bolder. The fake investment company Jake had created, Patterson Estate Management, was registered in Delaware with hidden ownership. The monthly statements I'd been receiving were sophisticated forgeries, complete with fake market performance data that Marcus traced to actual market reports. Jake had been copying real fund performances to make his lies believable. He's stolen $2.7 million, Carol. But here's the truly insidious part. He's done it in a way that skirts just under federal investigation thresholds. Every transaction is structured to avoid automatic scrutiny. He knew exactly what he was doing. Marcus pulled up more documents on his computer. He's been paying himself a management fee of $20,000 monthly. He created fake losses in volatile investments to explain major withdrawals. Look here. He pointed to a transaction. He claimed this $300,000 loss was from a failed tech investment, but the company he claimed to invest in doesn't exist. But the papers I signed, I started. He had you sign broad power of attorney documents while you were grieving. Legally, he had the authority to make these moves. Ethically and criminally, that's different. This is elder financial abuse, clear fraud, and embezzlement. The worst revelation came when Marcus found the property records. Carol, Jake and Sandra bought a house in Costa Rica 6 months ago. Cash purchase, $800,000. He turned his laptop toward me. There it was, a beautiful beachfront property, purchased with money that Harold had saved by working overtime, by skipping vacations, by driving used cars for decades. There's more, Marcus said gently. Jake's been telling people you're showing signs of dementia. He's been laying groundwork in case you ever caught on. Several of your mutual friends have mentioned to me that Jake's so worried about your mental state. My nephew hadn't just stolen my money. He'd been assassinating my character, preparing everyone to dismiss me if I ever spoke up. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, who I'd nursed through chickenpox, who'd cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart. He'd been performing an elaborate con for 2 years. You have about $300,000 left, Marcus concluded. Most of it is the equity in your house, which he probably planned to take next. Carol, he wasn't planning to leave you anything. The only reason you found out now is because one piece of mail went to the wrong address. I stared at the evidence spread across Marcus's desk. 2 years of lies documented in black and white. 2 years of Sunday dinners where Jake hugged me while calculating how much more he could steal. 2 years of "I love you, Aunt Carol," while he systematically destroyed my future. "Can you help me?" I asked Marcus. "Oh, Carol," he said, a grim smile crossing his face. "We're going to do more than help. We're going to bury him." Marcus had given me the name of a private investigator, a former FBI agent named Diane Walsh, who specialized in financial crimes. "If there's more to find, she'll find it," he'd promised. What Diane discovered over the next 2 weeks made the initial betrayal look like just the tip of the iceberg. She started with Jake's company computer. Her contact in IT, she wouldn't say who, pulled emails from the server that Jake thought he'd deleted. Diane brought them to my house on a thumb drive, warning me to brace myself. I made tea with steady hands, but they shook as I read. The first email was dated 3 years ago, 6 months before Harold died. From Sandra to Jake. "Your uncle looks terrible at dinner. His color is off. How much longer do you think?" Jake's response: "Doctor said his heart is weak. Maybe a year. We need to be ready." They'd been waiting for my husband to die, planning for it. The emails got worse. Sandra had researched elder financial abuse laws, sending Jake articles about legal loopholes. "Power of attorney is key," she'd written. "Once you have it, you can do almost anything as long as you document it as being in her best interest." Jake had replied with a spreadsheet. My God, they had a spreadsheet. Column A, Harold's estimated death date. Column B, timeline for gaining my trust. Column C, extraction schedule for the money. Column D, cover strategies. They'd actually created a project plan for robbing me, complete with milestones and risk assessments. "The old bat trusts you completely," Sandra had written 8 months ago. "She actually thinks you care about her. It's almost sad how easy this is." Old bat. The woman who'd taught Sandra how to make Thanksgiving. Turkey. Who'd held her hand during her miscarriage. Who'd sewn her wedding dress alterations by hand when the seamstress fell through. Old bat. Jake's response was equally cruel. "She keeps talking about leaving money to the grandkids' college funds, like those brats need it. Their parents can pay for their own kids. We deserve this more." Diane had found more. Jake had been in contact with a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, trying to dig up dirt about my mental state. He'd paid a neighbor $500 to write a statement saying she'd seen me confused and wandering in my yard. Completely false. I'd been gardening. He was building a competency case, preparing to have me declared mentally incompetent if needed. The Costa Rica property was just the beginning. They had accounts in the Cayman Islands with $1.2 million. Sandra had quit her job 6 months ago. She'd been lying about going to work, instead spending her days shopping and planning their early retirement. They'd bought a boat, registered in Sandra's maiden name. They'd been selling my story to their friends as caring for a difficult, elderly relative who was becoming a burden. But the document that broke me was a draft email Jake never sent, dated the day of Harold's funeral. Phase 1 complete. Harry's dead. Carol signed everything in her grief. She actually thanked me for taking care of everything. If guilt was currency, I'd be rich. Oh wait, I will be. Harry. No one called Harold Harry, except people who didn't really know him. Jake had lived in our home, eaten at our table, and never even bothered to really know the man who'd loved him like a son. Diane had discovered one final detail that chilled me. Jake had been researching assisted living facilities, the cheapest ones, the ones that accept Medicaid. He'd downloaded forms for involuntary commitment. The plan was clear: drain my money, declare me incompetent, dump me in a facility, and take my house. He'd even researched how long I was likely to live based on actuarial tables. He planned to visit you monthly, Diane said quietly. Found a calendar entry in his phone. Visit Aunt C. Maintain appearance of care. He was going to play the devoted nephew while you rotted in a state-funded facility. They hadn't just planned to rob me. They'd planned to erase me, to warehouse me like inconvenient furniture while they lived in luxury on Harold's life work. The conspiracy was complete, professional, and utterly without mercy. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated the old bat. That night, after Diane left, I sat alone in the dark living room. The house felt different now, poisoned by the knowledge of Jake's betrayal. Every corner held a memory that had been retroactively corrupted. The couch where Jake had sat comforting me after Harold's funeral. He'd been calculating my net worth. The dining table where he'd carved the Thanksgiving turkey last year. He'd already stolen $1 million by then. The kitchen where he'd helped me organize Harold's medications in those final months. He'd been waiting, just waiting, for my husband to die. I found myself in Harold's study sitting in his leather chair that still smelled faintly of his cologne. Old Spice, which I'd bought him every Christmas for 40 years. His reading glasses were still on the desk where he'd left them. I picked them up, and that's when the dam broke. The sobs came from somewhere deep, a place I hadn't accessed even when Harold died, because losing Harold had been God's will, nature's course, something I could eventually accept. But this was a betrayal so calculated, so cruel, that it rewrote my entire understanding of love and family. I cried for the young couple who'd saved every penny, who'd driven a rusty Ford for 10 years because the kids might need something. I cried for Harold, who'd worked construction until his knees gave out, then worked desk jobs he hated because they paid better, who'd taken night shifts, weekend shifts, any shift that paid overtime. For our future, Carol, he'd say, kissing my forehead at 5 a.m. before another 16-hour day. We'd foregone so much. The trip to Italy I'd dreamed of. Next year, when we have more saved. The kitchen renovation we'd planned for 20 years. The old one works fine, and Jake might need help with graduate school. Harold's classic Mustang he'd always wanted. That money could earn interest instead. I pulled out our photo albums, torturing myself with evidence of my blindness. There was Jake at 8, grinning with his first bike. We'd bought it. Jake at high school graduation. We'd paid for his cap and gown when his parents couldn't. Jake at his wedding, dancing with me, whispering, "Thank you for everything, Aunt Carol. You're the mother I always wished I had." The cruelest photo was from 2 Christmases ago, the last one with Harold, Jake and Sandra by our tree, holding the expensive watch we'd given Jake. Harold, already sick but still smiling, his arm around Jake's shoulders. Me, beaming at my family. Sandra wearing the pearl necklace I'd given her, my mother's pearls. She'd cried when she opened the box. "No one's ever given me anything this precious," she'd said. Now I knew those were tears of guilt, or maybe triumph. They'd already started stealing from us by then. I found the sympathy cards from Harold's funeral. Jake's was on top, 3 pages of handwritten memories and promises. "Uncle Harold was my true father," he'd written. "I promise to honor his memory by protecting and caring for you always. You'll never be alone, Aunt Carol. You'll never have to worry. This is my sacred promise to him and to you." Sacred promise. The words made me physically ill. I stumbled to the bathroom and vomited, my body rejecting the poison of this revelation. Afterwards, I sat on the cold tile floor, the same floor where I'd found Harold that terrible morning, already gone. I'd screamed for Jake that day. He'd come, within minutes, held me while I wailed, handled the paramedics, the funeral home, everything. "I've got you, Aunt Carol," he'd whispered. "I've got you." He'd had me all right, had me exactly where he wanted me, grieving, vulnerable, trusting. I crawled back to Harold's chair and found our last anniversary card, the one he'd given me just months before he died. Inside his shaky handwriting, "My darling Carol, 43 years and I'd do it all again. Every sacrifice was worth it because we built something beautiful together. Our love, our family, our future. No one can take that away from us." But someone had. Someone we'd loved had taken it all away. The pain was unbearable. It wasn't just the money. It was the desecration of Harold's labor, the mockery of our trust, the theft of our love. Jake hadn't just stolen millions. He'd stolen my faith in family, my memories, my ability to trust my own judgment. How could I have been so blind, so stupid, so pathetically eager to believe I was loved? I sat in that chair until dawn, cycling between grief and rage and a humiliation so deep it felt like drowning. By sunrise, I was empty, hollowed out, a ghost in my own life. But ghosts, I realized, have nothing left to lose, and that perhaps made them dangerous. 3 days passed in a haze. I didn't eat, barely slept, ignored the phone. Emma called repeatedly, but I couldn't bear to tell her. Linda left worried voicemails. Even Mrs. Chen knocked, concerned when I didn't tend my garden. I ignored them all, sitting in Harold's chair, paralyzed by the enormity of what had happened to me. On the third night, I decided to organize Harold's desk, maybe preparing to sell everything, maybe just needing to touch something real. In the bottom drawer, beneath his engineering manuals, I found his Bible. Harold wasn't overly religious, but he read it occasionally, finding comfort in its wisdom. The envelope fell out, my name written across it in his careful hand. "For my darling Carol, open when you need me most." My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter, dated just a week before he died. "My dearest Carol, if you're reading this during hard times, remember who you are. Not who you think you are, but who I've watched you be for 43 years. You think I was the strong one, but sweetheart, you're wrong. You survived losing your parents at 19 and raised your sister alone. You worked 3 jobs to put yourself through night school. When I got injured and couldn't work for 6 months, you held our family together with sheer will. You fought off breast cancer without ever letting the girls see you cry. You are titanium disguised as kindness. I know you trust too easily. It's your blessing and curse. Someone may take advantage of that trust. If they do, remember, you're not weak for trusting. They're weak for betraying. But Carol, my warrior disguised as a grandmother, you don't stay down. You never have. When you were 35, that contractor tried to cheat us on the house. Repairs. You studied building codes for weeks, then demolished him in small claims court. The judge said you should have been a lawyer. Remember when the school board tried to cut the special needs program? You organized the parents, spoke at every meeting, and saved it. You've always been a fighter, Carol. You just fight with grace. If someone has wronged you, if you feel broken, remember, you're not broken. You're just gathering strength. You survived poverty, loss, cancer, and 43 years of my bad jokes. You can survive anything. Don't let anyone take your dignity. Don't let them rewrite your story. You're not a victim. You're Carol Ann Patterson, and you're the strongest person I've ever known. Now get up and remind them why I called you my secret weapon. All my love. Forever. Harold P.S. Check the back of my filing cabinet, behind the tax folders, just in case. I read it 3 times, crying different tears now, not of grief, but of recognition. Harold had seen this possibility. He'd known I might face betrayal, might need reminding of who I was beneath the grief. I stood up, legs shaky from 3 days of sitting. In the filing cabinet, exactly where Harold indicated, I found a manila envelope. Inside, contact information for Harold's attorney best friend, Thomas Morrison. Jake didn't know about him. Account numbers for a small savings account at a credit union. $50,000 Jake had missed. And a note, emergency fund, stay strong. Harold had prepared a lifeline, knowing I might need it. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror for the first time in days. The woman staring back looked haggard, defeated, but in her eyes, something was stirring. Not the gentle grandmother Jake expected to manipulate, but someone else. Someone who'd survived everything Harold's letter reminded me of. I showered, fixed my hair, put on the red lipstick Harold had loved. Then I made coffee, strong, black, and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad. At the top I wrote, Operation Sacred Promise. If Jake wanted to mock sacred promises, I'd show him what keeping one really meant. First I called Thomas Morrison. Tom, it's Carol Patterson. Harold said to call you if I ever needed to go to war. His response was immediate. When and where? Next, Marcus Thompson. I'm ready to bury him. What do you need from me? Then Diane Walsh. Keep digging. I want everything. I called Emma. Sweetheart, I need you to come home. Bring your laptop and that friend from law school. Tell no one. Finally, I texted Jake. Dinner Sunday? I want to discuss some changes to my will. You and Sandra should both be there. His response was instant, eager. Of course, Aunt Carol. We'll bring dessert. I smiled. Not the gentle smile of Aunt Carol, but something Harold would have recognized from 40 years of watching me protect our family. Jake thought he'd robbed a helpless widow. He was about to learn he'd declared war on Carol Ann Patterson. And I don't lose wars. Thomas Morrison's law office felt like a war room. Emma had driven in from Seattle immediately, bringing her law school roommate who now worked in elder law. Marcus was there with his forensic files. Diane joined us by video, still investigating. Tom stood at a whiteboard mapping out our strategy like a general planning an invasion. First thing, Tom said, we need Jake to feel completely secure. Carol, you'll need to give an Oscar-worthy performance. Can you play the confused, declining elderly woman? Tom, talk to God, I said, steel in my voice. I raised 2 teenagers through puberty. I can act. But the real breakthrough came when Tom started researching property records for the case. Carol, tell me about Jake's house. When did he buy it? About 15 years ago, right after he married Sandra. But wait, a memory surfaced. No, that's not right. His parents almost lost that house in bankruptcy 20 years ago. Harold and I helped somehow. Harold handled it. Tom's eyes sharpened. Excuse me. He disappeared into his records room, returning with a dusty file box. Harold was meticulous. If he helped with property, there'll be documentation. What we found changed everything. 20 years ago, Jake's parents faced foreclosure. Harold and I had paid off their mortgage, $127,000. But Harold, wise man that he was, hadn't just given them the money. He'd created a trust, with us as the actual owners, giving Jake's parents lifetime residency rights. When they died, the ownership would transfer to Jake, but only if the trust wasn't dissolved first. The trust documents were ironclad, drafted by Tom himself. Jake's been living in your house for 15 years, Tom said slowly. He's been paying property taxes and insurance, thinking he owns it. But legally, Carol, you own that house. You've always owned it. The room went silent as we absorbed this. Then Emma started laughing. Sharp, vindicated laughter. He stole millions from you while living in your house? It gets better, Tom continued, scanning the documents. The trust has a morality clause. If the beneficiary commits any crime against the trustees, they forfeit all rights immediately. We spent the next week preparing meticulously. Diane discovered Jake had been recording our conversations, thinking he was gathering evidence of my decline. We decided to use his own tactics against him. I started calling Jake more frequently, acting confused. "Jake, dear, I can't remember. Did you say you moved my money? Where is it again?" I'd let my voice waver, repeat questions, sound lost. He ate it up, his responses becoming increasingly patronizing. "Don't worry about it, Aunt Carol. That's why I'm handling everything." Emma installed tiny cameras in my living room and kitchen, completely legal in my own home. Marcus prepared a detailed forensic presentation showing every stolen penny. Tom drafted the legal documents, not just for recovery, but for criminal prosecution. But I needed him to confess, clearly, undeniably. That's when I remembered Jake's arrogance, his need to be the smartest person in the room. He wouldn't be able to resist gloating if he thought he'd won completely. I practiced my final performance in the mirror. The confused signing of papers, the trembling hands, the defeated acceptance. Then the question, casual, almost absent-minded, that would destroy him. "Did you ever check who actually owns your house?" Emma helped me prepare the papers he'd want me to sign, documents that looked like property transfer forms, but were actually confessions. Hidden in the legal language were admissions of fraud, elder abuse, and embezzlement. Jake never read documents he gave others to sign. He wouldn't read ones he was signing himself. We scheduled everything for Sunday. Tom would be waiting in his car outside. The police detective specializing in elder fraud would be parked around the corner. Emma would be upstairs recording everything on her laptop. The couple from the FBI's Elder Fraud Division, who'd been very interested in Jake's interstate money transfers, would be listening in. I baked Jake's favorite apple pie, the one his mother, my sister, used to make. It seemed fitting somehow. The Last Supper before the betrayal was reversed. Saturday night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Harold's chair, holding his picture. "Tomorrow, my love," I whispered. "Tomorrow we get justice." The trap was set. The actors were in place. All I had to do now was perform the role of my life, the helpless victim who wasn't helpless at all. Sunday arrived gray and drizzling, pathetic fallacy at its finest. I woke at 5 a.m., unable to sleep longer, and went through my morning routine with deliberate calm. Shower. Hair styled, but slightly messy, the way an elderly woman might struggle to fix it properly. Makeup minimal, making me look paler, more fragile. I chose my outfit carefully. Harold's favorite cardigan over a floral dress, house slippers instead of proper shoes. Every detail crafted to look like a declining widow. Emma was already downstairs, setting up her equipment in the guest bedroom. "The cameras are perfect, Mom. Every angle covered. The FBI agents are in position in the van outside. Detective Morrison just confirmed he's ready." I nodded, my stomach churning. What if he suspects? "He won't," Emma said firmly. "Jake's fatal flaw is his arrogance. He thinks he's already won." At noon, I started preparing dinner. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, comfort food that would make Jake feel secure. The apple pie cooled on the counter, its cinnamon scent filling the kitchen. I'd made it exactly like my sister used to, before addiction took her. Jake's mother's recipe, a recipe for justice. At 2 p.m., Tom texted, "In position, documents ready." At 2:30, Diane called briefly, "Found one more thing. Jake bought Sandra a $200,000 Ferrari last week, paid cash, my money, Harold's overtime. Our sacrifices turned into a toy for the woman who called me an old bat. At 2:45, I practiced my confused elderly woman act one more time, shuffling around the kitchen, letting my hands shake slightly as I stirred the gravy. I whispered my key line over and over. Did you ever check who actually owns your house? It had to sound casual, almost forgetful, like a random thought from a declining mind. At 3 p.m. sharp, Jake's Mercedes pulled into my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched them exit. Jake wore an expensive suit. Armani, I'd guess. Probably $3,000 of my money. Sandra had on designer everything, carrying a Hermes bag that cost more than most people's cars. They were laughing about something as they walked to my door. I opened it before they knocked, playing the eager, lonely aunt. Jake, Sandra, come in, come in. I've been so looking forward to this. Jake hugged me, and it took everything not to recoil. He smelled like expensive cologne and betrayal. You look tired, Aunt Carol. Have you been sleeping? Oh, you know, I said vaguely, shuffling back toward the kitchen. Sleep doesn't come easy at my age. They followed me, Sandra's eyes already scanning my home, probably calculating its value. I caught her checking out the china cabinet, the silver set, Harold's grandfather clock, shopping in my home while I was still living in it. During dinner, I rambled, told the same story twice about the garden, called Sandra by the wrong name once, then acted flustered. Oh dear, I'm sorry, Sandy. Sandra. My mind isn't what it was. Jake exchanged meaningful looks with his wife. They thought I was deteriorating perfectly on schedule. Aunt Carol, Jake finally said, pulling out his manila folder, the weapon he'd chosen for my execution. We need to talk about your situation. I let my face fall. My situation? Your finances. I'm afraid I have terrible news. His face arranged itself into practiced sorrow. The investments have failed. The market crash hit your portfolio particularly hard. You've lost almost everything. Everything? I whispered, making my voice small. I'm so sorry. He spread the papers across my coffee table, the same table where Harold and I had planned our future. But I have a solution. You'll sign the house over to me, and I'll take care of you. You'll live here with us. We'll move in to help you. But this is my home, which is why we'll all live here together, Sandra said, her smile shark-like. Family takes care of family. The papers sat before me, fraud documents disguised as salvation. I picked up the pen with shaking fingers, let them see me struggle with the cap, started signing where Jake pointed, each signature deliberate and shaky. There, Jake said, as I signed the last page, satisfaction thick in his voice. That wasn't so hard, was it? I set down the pen, looked up at him with confused, watery eyes. Then, as if the thought had just occurred to me, a random firing in a declining mind, I asked the question I'd rehearsed 100 times. Jake, I'm curious about something. Did you ever check who actually owns your house? The silence was deafening. Jake's smile froze and slowly started to crack. Jake's face went through a spectacular transformation. Confusion, dismissal, then the first flicker of fear. What are you talking about? Of course I own my house. I pulled out the trust documents from beneath my cushion, where I'd hidden them earlier. My hands were perfectly steady now. Actually, Jake, you don't. You never have. That's ridiculous. But his voice cracked slightly. I've been paying the mortgage for 15 years. No, I said, my confused elderly act evaporating like morning mist. You've been paying property taxes and maintenance on my house, the house Harold and I bought for your parents when they went bankrupt. the house we put in an irrevocable trust with ourselves as owners. I spread the documents on the coffee table, right next to the papers I'd just signed. See? Morrison Family Trust, established 2005. Beneficiaries Robert and Margaret Patterson, lifetime residency rights. Upon their death, transfer to Jacob Patterson, unless the morality clause is invoked. Sandra snatched the papers, her face draining of color as she read. This can't be legal. Oh, it's very legal, Tom Morrison said, walking through my front door with his briefcase. I drafted it myself. Hello, Jake. Sandra. Jake stood abruptly, the chair scraping. You can't just walk in here. Actually, I invited him, I said. It's my house, just like your house is my house. Even if this is real, Jake stammered, it doesn't matter. You signed over this house to me, just now. You signed it. Did I? I picked up the papers I'd signed, pretending to examine them. Oh my. Jake, you really should read documents more carefully. These aren't property transfer papers. Emma walked in from the hallway, laptop in hand. They're confessions. You just witnessed and notarized admissions of fraud, elder abuse, and embezzlement. Mom signed them as the victim statement. You signed as witness to their authenticity. Jake lunged for the papers, but Tom was faster, securing them in his briefcase. I wouldn't, Jake. That would be assault. This is entrapment, Sandra shrieked. You senile old bitch. You set us up. Senile? I pulled out my phone, playing back a recording of Jake from 2 weeks ago. The old bat trusts me completely. 2 years and we're set for life. Then another. She's declining fast. Perfect timing. You recorded me? No, Jake. You recorded you. We found your little recording device in my kitchen. Diane is very thorough. I stood, no longer the fragile widow, but the woman who'd fought cancer and won, who'd raised a family from poverty, who'd survived everything life threw at her. Every conversation where you talked about my decline while documenting your theft, recorded. Every fake financial statement you created, we have them. Every transfer to Costa Rica, the Cayman Islands, your Ferrari purchase last week, documented. Marcus walked in with Detective Morrison and 2 FBI agents. Mr. Patterson, I'm Agent Chen with the FBI's Elder Fraud Unit. You're under arrest for interstate wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse. Mrs. Patterson, Sandra turned to me, tears suddenly flowing. Please, we're family. I'm sorry about the old bat comment. I didn't mean... Stop, I said quietly. You sat at my Thanksgiving table planning my destruction. You wore my mother's pearls while calling me pathetic. You spent my husband's death benefit on handbags. Save your tears for prison. As the FBI agents cuffed Jake, he finally found his voice again. You can't prove anything. I had power of attorney. It was all legal. Detective Morrison spoke up. Legal authority used for illegal purposes is still fraud, Mr. Patterson. And thanks to your meticulous record keeping, which you thought proved your legitimacy, we have everything, including the emails where you and your wife called this Phase 1 and discussed Mrs. Patterson's actuarial life expectancy. Jake's colleagues, who I'd secretly invited to celebrate Jake's promotion, began arriving just as he was being led out in handcuffs. His boss, several coworkers, even some clients, all witnessing his spectacular downfall. Sandra tried to run, but was caught at her Ferrari, the one she'd bought with my money, now being tagged as evidence. Aunt Carol, Jake called desperately as they pushed him into the squad car. I loved you. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I walked over to him, leaning down to the window. No, Jake. Love doesn't calculate actuarial tables. Love doesn't steal futures. You didn't love me. You loved my money. And now you'll have 20 years to think about the difference. The street filled with neighbors, all watching Columbus's respectable accountant revealed as a criminal. Mrs. Chen actually applauded. The trial was swift and decisive. Jake's meticulous record-keeping, which he'd thought would protect him, became the prosecutor's star evidence. Every falsified document, every transferred dollar, every calculated lie was laid out in court. The forensic accountant testified that it was the most sophisticated elder fraud scheme he'd seen, and also the most thoroughly documented by the perpetrator himself. Jake got 15 years federal prison, no possibility of parole for 10. Sandra got 12 years. The judge, a stern woman whose own mother had been a victim of elder fraud, showed no mercy. Mr. Patterson, you didn't just steal money. You stole trust, family bonds, and the security of a woman who loved you as a son. This court has seen criminals with more honor than you. The asset recovery was remarkable. The FBI froze everything: the Costa Rica property, the Cayman accounts, the Ferrari, the Mercedes, even Sandra's jewelry. Within 6 months, I recovered $2.3 million of the stolen $2.7 million. The rest had been spent, but the court ordered Jake and Sandra to pay restitution from any future earnings for life. Jake's house, my house, became mine to decide about. I could have sold it immediately, erased every memory. Instead, I did something Harold would have loved. I had it renovated and turned it into transitional housing for women leaving abusive relationships. The Margaret Patterson House, I named it, after Jake's mother, my sister, the woman who'd struggled with addiction but had loved her son fiercely. She would have been horrified by what Jake became. Your mother would be proud, I told her photograph, as I hung it in the entrance. This is the good that comes from the bad. Emma and Linda grew closer to me through the ordeal. Emma took a leave of absence to help me restructure my finances properly, setting up safeguards and checks that would prevent anyone, family or otherwise, from taking advantage again. Linda started visiting monthly, bringing her children who barely knew me before. We almost lost you to Jake's lies, Mom, she said. Never again. I moved to a beautiful senior living community, not the Medicaid facility Jake had researched for me, but a vibrant place with gardens and activities, and people who'd lived interesting lives. My apartment overlooked a pond where herons fished in the mornings. I could afford the best care for life, thanks to Harold's recovered money. The other residents knew my story. It had made national news. Elder fraud victim turns tables on nephew in spectacular sting operation, the headlines read. I became something of a celebrity, asked to speak at senior centers about financial self-protection. I always started with Harold's words: trust, but verify, especially with family. I taught a weekly class on recognizing elder fraud. Former victims came, their children came, social workers came. We talked about the warning signs: sudden new affection from distant relatives, pressure to sign documents, isolation from other family members, being made to feel like a burden. Your money is your security, I'd tell them. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting it. 6 months after the trial, I visited Jake in federal prison. He looked older, grayer, smaller in his orange jumpsuit. Why? He asked immediately. Why did you come? To tell you something your mother would want you to hear, I said. I forgive you, Jake, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying hatred is too heavy at my age, but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. When you get out, don't contact me. Don't come near my family. Start fresh somewhere else and try to become the man your mother believed you could be. He cried then, ugly sobs that might have been genuine, or might have been another performance. I no longer cared enough to figure out which. I left the prison and drove to Harold's grave, laying fresh flowers against his headstone. "We did it, my love," I whispered. "We protected what we built. Our granddaughters will go to college. Our daughters are secure. And I'm going to be okay." The sun broke through the clouds as I stood there, warming my face. Somewhere, Harold was smiling. I drove home, my real home in the senior community, and spent the evening teaching my neighbor Agnes how to check her financial statements online. She was 82 and determined never to be a victim. "You're a warrior, Carol," she said admiringly. "No," I corrected her, thinking of Harold's letter. "I'm titanium disguised as kindness." That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in 2 years, knowing justice had been served and Harold could rest easy. 5 years have passed since that Sunday when I asked Jake about his house. 5 years since I learned that the boy I'd raised like a son had orchestrated my financial destruction while smiling at my dinner table. I'm 73 now, and every morning when I tend my small balcony garden at the senior community, I think about the lessons this journey taught me. The clematis Harold planted at our old house blooms somewhere new now, just as I do. The new owners, a young family who reminds me of Harold and myself 40 years ago, send me pictures of it climbing their fence, purple flowers reaching toward the sun. They don't know the full story of their house, only that it was sold by an elderly widow who moved on to a new chapter. And that's enough. People often ask me if I saw it coming, if there were signs I ignored. The truth is, love is often blind by design. We choose not to see what would break our hearts. Jake's betrayal taught me that the greatest cons aren't pulled by strangers in the shadows. They're orchestrated by those we trust in the light. The nephew who helps with groceries, the daughter-in-law who cries at funerals, the family member who steps up when you're drowning in grief. But here's what I want every person watching to understand. Being trusting isn't weakness. Loving freely isn't stupidity. The capacity to trust, to love, to believe in family, these are strengths. Jake's weakness was his greed, his willingness to destroy someone who loved him for money. My strength was in refusing to let his betrayal define my final chapter. The money mattered. Yes. Harold worked his hands raw for that money. We sacrificed vacations, dreams, comfort for that security. But money can be recovered, replaced, rebuilt. What Jake really tried to steal was my dignity, my agency, my belief in good. That's what elder abuse really is. Not just theft, but an attempt to erase someone's humanity, to reduce them to a problem to be managed, a resource to be drained. If you're watching this and you're vulnerable, elderly, grieving, isolated, please know this. You are not a burden. Your money is yours, earned through years of work and sacrifice. Anyone who makes you feel guilty for protecting your assets is showing you their true character. Document everything, question everything, and never ever sign anything without understanding it completely. If someone rushes you, that's a red flag. If they isolate you from other family or advisors, that's a siren. If you're watching this as someone's child, grandchild, or caregiver, remember that elder fraud is often a crime of opportunity mixed with entitlement. Mom and Dad would want me to have this. They don't need all that money at their age. I'm doing them a favor by managing things. These are the lies we tell ourselves before crossing unforgivable lines. Your elderly relative's money is not your inheritance in advance. It's their security, their dignity, their choice. To those who've been victims like me, you're not stupid. You're not naive. You were betrayed by someone who weaponized love against you. It's not your failure. It's theirs. Recovery isn't just about money, it's about reclaiming your story. Don't let them write your ending. Harold once told me that money is just stored time, hours of life converted into currency. When someone steals from the elderly, they're stealing the accumulated time of an entire lifetime. They're thieves of the highest order, taking not just dollars, but decades. But here's the beautiful truth I discovered. They can steal your money, but they can't steal your spirit unless you let them. They can empty your accounts, but not your character. They can betray your trust, but not break your capacity to rise. I want to leave you with this thought. Every family has the potential for a Jake, but every family also has the potential for justice. Stay vigilant. Document everything. Trust, but verify. And remember, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back like I did? Or would you have walked away? If you have elderly relatives, how are you protecting them? Not from themselves, but from those who might exploit them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, an elderly parent, a trusting grandparent, or even someone who might be sliding toward their own Jake moment, please share this with them. Sometimes a story like mine can be the wake-up call that saves someone else's future. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video about resilience, justice, and the unbreakable human spirit. Remember, your money is your time made tangible, your dignity is non-negotiable, and your story, that's yours to write, no matter who tries to steal the pen. Until next time, this is Carol Patterson, reminding you that it's never too late to fight back, and you're never too old to win.